So everyone who's been listening since we've been online in the morning, we started in the morning on Africa Podcast Day at 7 a.m. East Africa time with a moment of just reflection of where we've come as Africa Podfest. Now, there's a part of you that you may not know is alive, well, and kicking, which is one, the spirit of research and collaborative research is very strong in the African podcasting community. So, and as you know, Melissa is an original in the field of African podcasting research since even before the time of Africa Podfest. So, Melissa, could you talk about where we are at?
Yeah, so one of the most foundational pieces of us building an industry that serves us and serves our voices as Africans is to use credible information to make our decisions, whether you're a podcaster, whether you're an investor, whether you're an advertiser, whether you're a producer, podcast producer, a studio owner, whatever part of the podcasting industry you'd like to be involved in and that you're in now, credible information is a foundation of a sense of confidence and a sense of grounding, really, to grow your podcast. So we've been teaming up with our friends at Baraza Media Lab and SemaBOX, who you've heard us talk about so much today because they really are a part of the village of Africa Podfest. And today we are honored to be able to speak to Maurice Otieno, who's the executive director at Baraza Media Lab, and Doris Onyango, who is the lead at Dada Podcast Incubator, a really cool initiative of SemaBOX. And she's also been our producer for Africa Podcast Day, by the way.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. And in a twist, I'm going to continue this tradition of asking everybody to introduce their neighbor and to ask whether Doris can introduce Maurice and Maurice can introduce Doris. And we'll start with Maurice.
Wow. Thanks for putting me on the spot. First of all, thank you so much for organizing this auspicious occasion. And you all look really, really, really nice. I feel underdressed on this panel. I feel like I'm sitting next to Miriam Makeba on the right. But wow, how do I start introducing Doris? I think I usually call her like the beacon of SemaBOX. She's the one who's basically holding everything up. Apart from being glamorous and always good looking and warm within the space. I think Doris is the engine that runs SemaBOX, while Dan, who most of you probably know, is the face. So Dan is the pretty face that goes around talking about SemaBOX, but really the person who's running it is Doris. So that is how I would introduce Doris.
Excellent, excellent.
Wow, how I'd introduce Maurice is tenacious, dog with a bone, and a connector of people. Oh my goodness. Once Maurice has put his mind towards achieving something, the thing must be achieved. No ifs, no buts, no ways about it. And I think he, from what I've experienced over the last year working with him and with Baraza Media Lab, is he values collaboration and he's not afraid to introduce you to partners, introduce you to future donors, or just make connections that he thinks that might be valuable to you. So that means he also listens and observes the things that you do as well. So that's how I'd introduce him.
Wow, we should do this all the time, right?
Should have had a go fast. So I learned from her. Now she set the standards very high.
This is wonderful. So you can both now rewrite your bios.
Yes,
your
to reflect those changes.
I know, right?
The research report that we released late last year is called Is This Mic On? And it was examining what's driving podcast growth. How is podcasting taking root in Africa, both from a podcaster perspective and from the audience perspective? And we found some really interesting insights in talking to podcasters and in looking through the data from audiences and also from SemaBOX's many, many podcast episodes recorded, produced, and published and loved by audiences. So one of the insights, just some of the insights from the podcaster perspective, what's driving podcasters to take the mic is this opportunity to experiment with new ways to really go deep and tell stories that audiences are hungry for. And then there's also just the fact that podcasting is there are lower barriers to access, so you don't have to already be a cool kid, unlike other media, to start and to thrive in podcasting. We also found on the other side that there are a lot of barriers and challenges that podcasters are facing in their journey to growing. So they might be really gifted, really tenacious, have the right story, have the right audience, but there's some external factors just in the environment that are slowing down their growth. And then on the audience side, we found that a lot, in fact, women, people who identify as female, are the majority, are driving audience growth of podcasts in Africa. So we wanted to be able to have you here sharing your perspective on and your reactions to what we found in this piece of research with our audience. Yeah, and Joe, I'd like to set that ball rolling.
Yes, absolutely. I am so curious because I consider you on the cusp of what's new and edgy in African podcasting, and also able to see from a media ecosystem perspective what podcasting means for the future. So I wondered, if you've listened and read and checked out the research as it came out over time, the kind of audience surveys we did, the kinds of podcast data that we were able to analyze. What was surprising for you from the research project Is This Mic On?
I'll start with what was not surprising in terms of the distribution of the listenership. So yes, most podcasting, especially when people are launching, you could see there's a high listenership in Kenya. Then it goes down to like some parts of Europe and North America.
Yeah.
However, what was surprising was the ratio of the gender of the listeners, where there was more ladies listening than men. That was a bit surprising for me. And the other fascinating data for me was just the pockets of where podcasting exists, like Angola, Francophone speaking countries and Portuguese speaking countries. So those was also like a bit of nuggets that surprised me within the research. But it was just awesome to, first of all, be part of adding a wealth of knowledge into the podcasting space, where as of now, we all know there's little in terms of research that has been done within that space. So those are some of the things that I learned through the little skimming through that I did of the research.
Yes, Doris, you work every day, literally in the trenches with podcasters, from supporting them to craft and refine their ideas and their stories,
Yes.
to the technical side of it, to the publishing.
Yes.
What surprised you as well from that?
What surprise? Okay, I think I guess I'll start like Maurice and say what did not surprise me is that women are more into podcasting than men. And really that's because from what I've seen, a lot of women are into self-improvement. What can I do to make myself better? And with the things that I have learned, how can I impart that knowledge to others so that they don't go through the thing I went through, or just to share their experiences to show that you're not alone. The thing that surprised me the most is the hunger for vernacular radio, for vernacular podcasts, for vernacular podcasts.
Yeah.
And especially from Africans in diaspora. A lot of podcasts you'll see weird places, like my podcast has listenership in Sweden, and very well. I don't know anybody in Sweden, but Kenyan diaspora in those areas, they're hungry for news, for information, for stories, for conversations that sound like them and come from home. That was the most surprising thing for me. Yeah.
Okay. So in terms of like the way you've seen, the diaspora audience kind of driving a lot of the growth of podcasting, what can you kind of look forward to 2022 going forward, now that you've seen kind of that growth taking podcasts from Africa to African audiences and people who love Africa, both in the continent and abroad?
I think that primarily for Kenyans, and the audience is here. It's right at home. It's my neighbor, it's my co-workers, it's the people that I interact with every day.
Yes.
But I have friends who are in the diaspora, so I'll say, hey, have you checked this out? Have you seen what this is? So what the trajectory I see is podcasting is going to get bigger.
Yes.
Here, there's more money that is being put into podcasting right now, from what we've seen, and more people are willing. And it's not big corporates who are trying to put money. It's small organizations.
Yes.
Small businesses who want partner spots in your podcast, and that's what sustaining some podcasters right now. Yes.
Interesting.
I think in my view, I think what like these events is one of the things that I look forward to every year, and because I usually use this term like the squeaky wheelbarrow gets the greasing, and I think for the longest time, podcasting has not been mainstream in Africa, mainly because we've not made enough noise. But with these kind of events, with the kind of infrastructure that people are building across the continent, and with your, let's say, podcasting tour that you've been doing, I think I'm seeing 2022, 2023 becoming that point where enough noise will mainstream podcasting. And not only noise, actually, let me say enough necessary noise. Necessary noise.
Yes.
Which is also the name of a really popular Kenyan band. From back in the day.
Yes.
And just to expand on that, what do you think we need to do or needs to be done from a macro perspective, like policy, but also from an industry perspective? You being a super connector and an agitator for innovation, you're always on the cusp. What do you think needs to be done, like in the investor space, in the innovation space in general?
For podcasting, I think we need to offer research, so that we can have some tangible data, some tangible inference points. I do think the other piece is that we need to offer space for innovative ways of how podcasting can go to the last mile. Because as of now, podcasting is still nascent in the ecosystem, but it's growing with enough work that the community is doing, including Africa Podfest, right? But I think for us to be able to get podcasting to somebody in rural Kenya, rural Nigeria, there needs to be space for innovation. In terms of distribution, there needs to be more localized solutions. So AfriPods are coming in to solve for that. And infrastructure. So people like SemaBOX putting up the infrastructure to just mainstream some of these people who have been in the periphery of podcasting. So I think, and in this case, I see a situation where private sector, SemaBOX, AfriPods, Africa Podfest, are the ones who lead the charge. But we do need to almost, as always, handhold our government and policy organizations to be able to start putting in place policies that are not basically stifling the growth of podcasting, but enabling it, So is it a matter of maybe at some point, could we partner with some telecos to have internet bandwidth for podcasting reduced, like they have done with things like YouTube, where there's YouTube Lite and you can consume YouTube wherever within the country you can. So those are some of the things that I see people coming up with, like, could we have podcasting that is offline, that you don't need to be on the internet? Because for me, it's also a matter of inclusivity. If you look at it from that angle, where already it's including the women who are not being heard initially. If women are the largest listeners, women are the largest podcasters. And now how do we include the people who are out of the cities, who are on the periphery of internet and the infrastructures?
I think and I love that Maurice has spoken about it from a macro level. I look at things from a creator kind of perspective. It is very important, and I've said this very, very many times, that creators and podcast creators need to collaborate. They always need to collaborate so that we can introduce each other to our audiences, right? So For example, if there's someone who has a business podcast and there's someone who has a tech podcast, why don't we find a way to combine both our expertise into one episode?
Yeah.
That will be interesting for both audiences. But what is most important is to collaborate in a way that it is beneficial to one another. So like if there's opportunity to make money, let's not be greedy. Let's do the work and let's both eat. And there's more of that pie to be shared, you know, in the industry.
So if I may add something, just based on the reference that Doris has made. So you find like most solutions in Africa, and even tech solutions, the big tech companies, don't usually have a product team here. Because Africa is the afterthought. Because you've made an adjustment in the US, in Europe, and everywhere. Then Africa is like, maybe those guys might need to pay via M-Pesa. Because, you know, but the thing that I'm seeing right now is that as we are building infrastructure, especially for podcasts, and going back to the creators concept that Doris has raised up, is that when I remember when Dada Incubator launched, there was a lot of assumption of like, I'll just walk into the studio, record, and I have a podcast. Then we forgot the background work that you need to do. From research, from intonation, from you know, all these things. And I think as we go into the years, there'll be a lot of resources for podcasters from Africa to be able to read and understand like, oh, actually I did 3 months before I even go and touch a mic. As a very famous philosopher called Dana said, like, before you sit down to even touch this mic, I need you to have done 3 weeks worth of work in terms of research and setting your production line. So things like those, I think, will be something that will be easily accessible to somebody who's going to start, and it will make the content creator more knowledgeable.
So you've touched on such an important part. We've been thinking about one of the recurrent themes is all the barriers that podcasters face, and a lot of them are to do with that technical capacity. And one of the ways that I've seen, for example, SemaBOX work with podcast creators is not just offering podcast services, but also creating opportunities for learning within the podcast learning community. For example, the Podex learning collaborative conference and conference that was held last year. So when you think about events like this, so Africa Podcast Days once a year, you're kind of building out a series of learning opportunities throughout the year. Why shouldn't anybody miss? Like, why should they always come on board and think through the learning as a continuous curve?
Oh my gosh, because innovation in the podcasting industry is continuous. I mean, who would have thought I'd be able to actually record a podcast on Anchor? Like from the back end, like I can record and the podcast will be out. Quality might be different, but that thing that I wanted to achieve would be done and will be out there for people to hear in the world. There's always innovation, and with that innovation, it means that the early adopters, the people who started in the industry, have more knowledge and will go further. So we are saying the people who have the knowledge, please come and teach the newbies. And the people who are not newbies, there's always a gem or a nugget or a piece of information that you will get from these kind of conferences or encounters. And even if you feel like, okay, I just went for this event to just network, that networking is something, you know?
And in terms of like where we see ourselves as an African podcasting ecosystem, I know a lot of where you work is within the Kenyan context. But I see a lot of overlap in the Kenyan experience with the, for example, the All Africa experience. What are some of the questions that you'd love to hear answered in upcoming research on African podcasting?
That's a very good question. I was told when somebody says that's a very good question, they're buying time to answer that question. You can see me buy time to know how to answer that question. For me, I think one thing is to know what are the infrastructure that are needed for podcasting to be pervasive, to be everywhere, like radio. Like in Africa, they say that, or in Kenya specifically, they say that radio is the most distributed medium, right? Or media. How do we get to that point? And there's no big difference because it's both voice. It's just more of the mode of distribution. So for me, it's what are some of the infrastructures that we need to put in place, and work backwards. Like, what are some of the policies that we can put in place?
Yes.
And this, for you to find all these questions is, again, as you said, research.
Yes.
So for me, it's very key on the policy, because I think policy is easy to scale. Because SemaBOX has existed, and Doris has done a very good job to make dance shine. But the thing is, policy can make us have 30 SemaBOXes across the country in one click, So for me, it's what are those infrastructures, and how do we work backwards to institute the right policies that will make this thrive?
I think research is important, especially when it comes to podcasting and podcasting in Africa, because it'll show us where we have opportunity to innovate. And now this is away from policy level. Like, how can I make podcasting more pervasive? How can I improve on the technology that is already there? How can I do marketing around podcasts? And there's so much, and I know with the research that we did, we only scratched the surface. But imagine if now I could do research into how much money there is in the African podcasting industry. We know how much money there is abroad,
Yes.
but we don't have the numbers here. Yeah.
When you speak about innovation, man, Doris is like, that's what I'm telling you. She's the one who's holding. You can see there she's throwing like some gems in there. Because the thing is, like, even from an innovation perspective, it's how do you get money to the creator?
Exactly,
right?
yeah.
So seeing, like, are there opportunities for the technologists who are within the media and podcasting space to look at how do we get money directly
Yes.
to the African podcasters? And is it innovative enough that is not your normal advertising? So those, I think, are the guys who are going to win in the next race of podcasting in Africa.
Oh, wonderful. So wonderful. I feel like, well, we have this recording. So
We do have
let's
this
expand on the
recording.
notes.
Yes. So if you've been taking notes, today is Africa Podcast Day. And so this is why this conversation is so critical in continuing to connect African podcasters with the knowledge you need and I need to make our podcast better and to make this industry actually much more able to support all of our efforts as creatives, as studios, as producers, as grant makers, and so on. So our podcast is really a quick take on African podcasting. How do you think we can close out this conversation, if at all? Well,
Yeah, we've opened. What we've done is open. But again, the reason why we started Sema Nasi is because we wanted to share with you, the podcast community, the awesome conversations that we tend to have behind closed doors. And now, can you imagine? Like, this is the privilege. We get to speak to such amazing people and to have these kinds of conversations.
yes.
So now that you know Maurice and Doris and Dan and the other people they mentioned, follow them. Follow Baraza Lab, Baraza Media Lab, follow SemaBOX. Go to their websites, which will be in the show notes as well, and find out more about them. Get in touch. Go to www.podcasting.africa to read the research report. And this is one of several research reports we also uploaded. We also published a literature review examining all the research that has been done about Black podcasting around the world and how that connects to African podcasting. We also have detailed notes from interviews that we took with podcasters. So there's just a lot of wealth already that exists that we're trying to build on. So you have no excuse for not at least getting started. And as Doris said, we've only scratched the surface.
Yes.
So the action here, follow them. Now you know them.
Yes,
Follow them.
yes.
No excuse.
Absolutely no excuse. And we've talked about the Is This Mic on research that we published at the end of 2021. It was absolutely powered by Baraza Media Lab. So thank you, Maurice, for making that happen together with your colleagues and everyone who's involved in the Baraza Media Lab ecosystem.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
Thank you for tuning in, staying tuned in to our first ever live podcast recording of Sema Nasi podcast.
Yes.
Our second ever episode, actually.
Right, exactly. So we are so excited. I'm going to hand it over back to you. Then you hand it over back to me. Then I hand it over back to you.
I was going to say for our audience today at Africa Podcast Day, where can they find Sema Nasi and when?
So you can find Sema Nasi on all major podcast hubs, including AfriPods. We've partnered with AfriPods to produce this podcast because we believe that partnerships do build great content, especially around the African continent. The podcast itself is produced at SemaBOX and also mastered at the Podcast Laundry studio as well. So it's got a lot of different partners who bring such energy and joy, and also their technical and creative expertise to the project. So thank you very much, Doris, on behalf of the SemaBOX team. We hope to do this for a very, very long time.
Yes. Thank you, Maurice. Thank you, Doris, for gracing our little podcast.
Yes.
A wonderful podcast.
Experimenting with us on Africa Podcast Day.
Yes.
Thank you for being here. For doing the work that you do.
Yes.
So, Joe, shall we close out the episode by saying thank you for listening to Sema Nasi?
Yes. 1, 2, 3. Thank you for listening to Sema Nasi.
And so that actually brings us to the end, sadly, of our program.
Yes, it does.
Africa Podcast Day. It's come too fast. Honestly,
Yes.
I still feel like continue.
We could continue, and we have been promising that for every one of you who has participated, you've participated in this day online on this virtual platform for a chance to win a very special prize. That prize is a 1-year subscription to Adobe Cloud Apps from your country, wherever you are. Courtesy of Africa Podfest. So right now, we are going to call in our special prize master, Tevin, to help us choose the winner of this special prize, just as a thank you to you for being part of this day with us. But before Tevin comes on, I have to thank Africa No Filter, AfriPods, Baraza Media Lab, SemaBOX, and also Tinsway Media for letting us continue to soar in this vision of Africa Podcast Day. I also want to thank the Discovery Tour partners in South Africa, Zambia, Kenya, Nigeria, and all the different podcasters who have featured in our programming to date, as well as everyone who's contributed to our success. We thank you and thank you.